Hello YouTube, today we're going to be having a look at the SH Monsterarts Godzilla from Mothra vs. Godzilla. When this figure first came out, I was super excited to get it. I really liked it once I got it, however, after years of owning it, I've actually have some mixed feelings now that I'd like to express. But before we get to that, let's start with the scale. As you can see, Godzilla from 1964 is just above 5 inches tall, making him extremely small in comparison to the other SH Monsterarts figures. His tail is about 6.5 inches in length, also making it probably one of the shortest tails of the SH Monsterarts Godzillas. As far as accessories go, Godzilla comes with nothing, which is completely disappointing. However, they have re-released the figure with a new paint job. They painted him to reflect his appearance when he first appears in the film, burrowing out of the ground, and that figure actually came with a breath effect piece, like the 1994 Godzilla. However, this figure doesn't come with anything, which is a bit disappointing. So like usual, let's start with the articulation. Starting from the head, Godzilla can't look too far up exactly. Theoretically, you could push his back further back in order to get him to look a bit higher, but the joint is really stiff, and it's actually quite difficult to pull back, so much so that you may end up pulling his entire torso off the lower half of his body, which is really quite disappointing. He can move forward quite a bit, but not much back. You can see too, it also creates this issue of this giant gap in the middle of his back, something I'm pretty confident is not screen accurate. It just looks a little strange when you look at him next to other Godzillas, and just this whole emptiness is just off-putting to me. But returning to the articulation, his head can look pretty far to the right or left, a decent amount when you combine it with his waist articulation. He can look down fairly good, more so than the 94 figure could, and much like all the other Godzillas, he has articulation in his mouth. The articulation in his arms are pretty good. You can get him into any natural pose that you'd want Godzilla to get his arms into. Moving back down to this joint, it can move left and right pretty decently, not too much motion out of that, and as we've saw before, you can't get him to crunch very far back or forward, leaving this very ugly gap here. His legs have decent articulation, pretty good actually. They can move in a pretty wide range. He has some sort of joint or cover right above his thighs, which allows him to get even further out like this for more dynamic poses, I suppose, since the Showa era Godzilla was a bit more acrobatic, let's say. His knees are good, there's a decent crunch, and you can definitely get him into any walking, stomping poses you'd like. And as an added little thing, he has a joint in the middle of his foot, which makes for great posing if you're wanting to have him stomp around a city or something. The articulation in the tail is pretty standard when it comes to Monsterarts. It's actually probably better than most SH Monsterarts tails. It can bend in almost any direction and hold its shape. I think that's partly due to the fact it's such a smaller figure that the tail has a lot less weight to it. It's a lot lighter and can thus hold its shape well. As far as the tail goes, pretty good articulation, almost makes up for the weird gap in articulation in the torso. On to detail, the figure is actually filled with detail, which I really appreciate. You can see his eyes have this sort of glassiness to them, this sort of translucent plastic they used, which is very accurate to the suit itself. If you recall in the film, his eyes were very glassy or reflective. The sculpt is very nice, much like the other Godzillas. The scales are done very well, very rugged, not very uniform, pretty much what you expect. If we were to take a look at his mouth here, we could see that his teeth and tongue are actually done very well. His
mouth is painted with a sort of reflective red paint to make it look as if his mouth is wet, or naturally so. His teeth are done pretty well. Not much bleeding in there, actually. It looks pretty good. The paint on the dorsal fins are done pretty nice. Gonna ignore this gap here. Not much bleeding at all. None that I can really see. Just like the other Godzillas, there's a sort of gradual effect from the grayish-greenish skin up into the sort of frosted area on the tips of his dorsal plates. His hands and feet have the same paint color scheme going on for him. Yellow nails that sort of have this rough, dirty sort of look to them. And then you can sort of see he has these sort of marks on his chest and his knees. And here's a close-up at his tail. Pretty nicely done. So before we end this review, let's bring in some other figures to compare the size. Here's Godzilla with his 1994 counterpart. Shin Godzilla. 2019 Godzilla. The Heisei King Ghidorah. And last but not least, Mothra and her larva. So what is the final verdict on Godzilla 1964 from SH Monsterarts? There's a lot of good about the figure, and a lot of bad. I'd have to say this may be one of my least favorite SH Monsterarts figures for just a few reasons, but let's start with the good things, shall we? Sculpt, paint, and most of the articulation is really good. He looks just like he does in the 1964 film. However, the articulation is limited in many places, especially in his torso, and I'd say even his neck. I'd say that he looks way too hunched over, at least in my opinion. I could be incorrect, perhaps I'm remembering the film wrong, but I'm pretty sure he stood a lot straighter in the film. And of course that gap in his back is just really distracting and just looks very strange. And then of course, not to mention his strange height. I think maybe they chose to make this figure a bit smaller so he would be in scale with their Heisei Mothra figure, perhaps. However, all the other Godzillas seem to be well in scale with this Mothra, so I'm not really sure why he's so small. Another theory I had was that the Showa figures that SH Monsterarts would produce would be in scale with this figure, and it kinda holds up. The Showa Mechagodzilla is kind of in scale with him, but it's just, he's so small that next to the other SH Monsterarts figures, especially Ghidorah, he looks a bit out of place. So I'd have to say he's a bit of a tough one to recommend. I'd say if you're trying to collect all the SH Monsterarts figures, he's definitely a must. He's not a bad figure in any regards. He just has some interesting flaws that you may or may not be able to see past. If you're really looking for a 1964 Godzilla that is well in scale with your other figures, this one may be a bit too small and maybe not your first pick, especially at the price he goes for now on eBay. So that's basically my review. I hope you enjoyed watching and are looking forward to more reviews in the future. Thanks for watching.